I'm just going to make sure I push record on the meeting. And so, okay, we're going to kick it off. Today, we are going to be talking about student engagement. This is LEDREP meeting 1 out of 2 for December. So make sure you put December 15th at noon. That's next Tuesday on your calendar, as we're going to come back together and talk about what we know about the 2021 legislative session. So make sure to tune in for that. Before we get started, I want to let you know we're going to keep with our same schedule for today. We're going to be talking about roles and resources. We've got a couple of poll questions for you. And then we have actually a student, Shreya Meta, who's going to be sharing with you and presenting later today in the meeting. So we're excited to welcome her. And we'll have breakout group discussions at the end to sort of talk about what you've learned today. And also, before we get started, I want to remind you of our meeting protocols. Keep your microphone on mute when you're not talking. When you are talking, please make sure your mic is unmuted and your camera is on. And if you have questions throughout this meeting, please indicate so in the chat box by saying question or comment. And either myself or in some cases, Marissa will be watching and calling on you when it's time. As you also know, we hope that today you will continue to understand your role as a LEDREP, primarily as it comes to supporting students, either student representatives on your board or just engaging with students in your district. We're going to be sharing some resources with you that you can pass along to your fellow board members and to student reps that you may have. And of course, just getting to network and talk with directors from around the state is one thing that we always try to push in these meetings, as really it's about you guys teaching each other how you best can be LEDREPs. So excited to see so many of you today. And I've invited special guest Lori Oviatt, director from the Riverview School District, who is a rock star, all-star when it comes to championing student engagement efforts around the state. So I'm going to pass it over to Lori, who's going to provide a quick welcome and sort of kickoff message for today.
Thank you, Logan. Let me get my screen share up and going here. And let me know, Logan, can you see the presentation?
We can.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, welcome to LEDREP 101 series. I am really excited that Logan asked me to speak on student engagement. For those of you who have met me in the past, I can speak on student voice, student engagement, student representatives for hours. Logan didn't give me hours, he gave me 5 minutes. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about student engagement and the importance of student advocacy in our districts, as well as with our legislative representatives. For Riverview, let me click next here. We're a medium-sized district that encompasses the towns of Carnation and Duval, and we're near the Cascade foothills. So we're all in when it comes to student engagement at all levels. And I often share this definition with people as a grounding place for what is meant by student voice. And I think it's important, that we're all on the same page. At Riverview, we encourage all students to participate at board meetings. We have 2 student reps who sit on our board of directors and attend our board meetings. And about once a month, we have a student body presentation, and we encourage all students to present on issues that are near and dear to them during public hearing. Matter of fact, sometimes we invite our students when there's an issue going on in the community and we hear through the grapevine that there are some challenges going on. We'll invite our students to come and present to us during public hearing, and they feel very comfortable doing so and very welcome doing so. We also conduct student roundtables on specific topics of interest to the board to learn more about things from our students' perspective. So from our students, we have learned about the needs of their colleagues, and that has changed our policies and our procedures, and it's allowed our board to reallocate budget to fit their needs. So some of those things that we've heard from our high school students were that our ELL students who came into our district were not being supported very nearly enough, and quite often it was left to our high school students to support them in their learning. With hearing that, our board hired another support system, a person that could represent the student and support them in our district, which was really significant. Had we not heard that from our students, we would not know that they needed that additional support. So our student reps, they've given multiple presentations. We've been invited to school districts across the state to present on student voice and student engagement. We've also taken our student reps to NSBA and have given multiple WSSDA conference sessions over, gosh, a period of 10 to 15 years. And like I said, you know, it's resulted in changes in policies and procedures. It's resulted in budget allocation shifting. And we as a board and as a district can respond more rapidly to our student needs. So we feel very strong about listening to our students. You know, for the past 10 to 15 years, we have taken our student reps with us to the Day on the Hill. We prep them ahead of time with the legislative issues that come out of WSSDA, and we ask them to think about each of those legislative issues and how it impacts them. So how might this impact you? And we get them to understand what the issue is, and then they come up with their stories. So for example, in 2019, 2020, both our student reps testified, went with us to Day on the Hill. This is one we could do in person. Wish we could be still doing that, but it is what it is. And we sat in and talked with Mark Mullet, Lisa Callan, and Bill Ramos. And they wanted to hear, you know, it was a room of both Snoqualmie Valley, Snoqualmie School District and Riverview, and they wanted to hear from our students first. And the Snoqualmie students spoke up first, and they talked about the support they needed, and their concern was on suicides. And that led right into the Riverview School District students talking about, we had just experienced 4 suicides in our community. And our students, I mean, the passion came out in that room, and Lisa Callan just was amazing in listening to our students. So that led to 2 of our students testifying for House Bill 2589, which is the Student Suicide Prevention, Crisis Intervention, and Counseling. And it also led to our students participating in the first ever WSSDA Student Directed Task Force to provide input on how to implement House Bill 2589. So, you know, you can't underestimate the power of our students and our student voices, and our legislators listen to the students. So there are so many ways that we can empower our students to speak up and provide their voice. This is a slide from a white paper. It's k12insight.com, and it shares kind of some sobering statistics, and I'm not going to read them to you. I'm hoping that once we get the presentation sent off to Logan, I had some technical difficulties. He can send this out or share it with everybody so that you can look at these slides on your own and provide some, you know, read the statistics. But I mean, this one right here, research suggests most K-12 leaders aren't listening to their student needs. That just blows my mind. That's what we're here for. That's what our schools are for, is to listen to our students. So we need to figure out the ways on how to empower that. I just wanted to share, we have put together a student voice toolkit, and it talks about how we do student representation, but it also shares statistics from around the world on student voice and some very intricate details on how you can start, you know, have student reps on your board, and or how you can engage with student voice. So with that, I just want to thank all of you for being here, for listening, for really, and I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to think about how can you as a board member engage with your students in a way that allows you to hear their voice, allows you to hear their challenges and their issues, and allows you to think about your policies and your procedures and what might need to be changed in your district. So with that, Logan, I'll turn it back over to you. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lori, so much for sharing. I have gotten a couple of questions in the chat box about the PowerPoint. It will be available As soon as Lori and I can convert our slides and make them one, it'll be up on the website where you go to register for this meeting. So you can find it all there in the event you want to share it. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about some resources that we have as WSSDA and ways in which you and your student reps can engage with us. I want to start by sharing really that we are intentional about inviting students to join us in our work with the legislature, advocating for bills. As Lori mentioned, some of her student reps got to come down and provide testimony at the Capitol last year. That was a really great experience. We also are sort of in the market for resource development. So if any of your districts have resources as to how you engage student reps, please be sharing those with us as much as you can. We're looking to sort of create something from the WSSDA level sometime in 2021. And so anything that you have that might be able to guide us or give us some inspiration would be really helpful. And of course, those would be done with the input of student reps as well. And then also we are also able to provide opportunities for students around topic-based work groups. As Lori also mentioned, stealing all my thunder, Lori. We hosted our first ever student representative work group last summer to support House Bill 2589. And really we were able to gather student feedback, specifically supporting the bill, but we also expanded and talked generally about suicide prevention in schools and recommended curriculum strategies and other things that districts can implement locally to really get rid of that issue. And so those are definitely three things that we are able to provide for students. And where you can find that information is on our student representatives webpage. On the WSSDA website, if you hover to our strategic advocacy section of the website, underneath Get Involved, you'll find the LegRep page, which is where you go for all things LegReps, and you'll also see a student rep page, which as we continue to build this out and scale this up, this will be sort of the go-to spot for anything student engagement for student reps with WSSDA. And then also on that website, switching over to resource 3 is our student advocate distribution list. I would encourage you to share this sign up with any student reps on your board, or if you yourself want to stay attuned to opportunities for student reps, please go ahead and sign up on our website. This is the same form that you would use to fill out for in-session and our LegRep list. What you'll need to do is there's a question about, are you a student? If your student is filling that out, they would say yes. There's also an opportunity for you to say, no, I'm not a student, but I want student rep updates. And you'll be in the loop in terms of all of the things that we share with students, opportunities that are out there. It's pretty frequent actually that we're looking for some panel of students to join us on the WSSDA networking call, join us at annual conference. We had students as part of the magic show. If you were at the president's reception, that was sort of an all call for students. So we do communicate through that list quite frequently, and you and more likely your student reps would definitely benefit from signing up for that. So please check that out on our website if you haven't already. And LegReps, what can you do locally to support your students? You've seen a lot of these words before when it comes to representing your district with the legislature, and just consider everything that you do. Why not tap into a student as well? So it'd be really great if you sat down and had some intentional carved out time to walk through either WSSDA's legislative priorities or your own district's legislative priorities with your student reps. Make sure they understand what it is that your district needs and is looking for in the current legislative session. Students are, in my opinion, one of the best ways to tell a story because they are real life examples and everything that you do impacts them directly. So you know, bring students in when you're out telling your story. Schedule time for your students to talk with legislators. Anytime that we bring a student into the room, it's like the legislator's eyes will shift from us to the student, and that is where the attention is and belongs. So anytime you can bring your students in front of legislators is also really important. And of course, ask them to sign up for the distribution list if they haven't already. I think they will find it quite valuable and informative. So before we move on to our next section of the agenda, does anyone have questions about any of the resources that I just shared? If you do have questions at this point, please type question into the chat box and I'll call on you. If you don't have a question right now, don't worry, we will have some time to come back at the end of the meeting if there's nothing on the top of your mind right now. So I'll give it just a second. And if nothing comes in, we will move on to our next portion of the agenda. Okay, can I repeat the link? So Deb, are you speaking about the link to the sign up form? Is that right?
Yeah, yes, please. I was trying to type fast before you went on, so I didn't get to finish, but yes, that would be it.
No worries. Thanks for getting it in there. Yeah, you can find that sign up form on wasda.org.
Yeah,
If you go to the strategic advocacy tab, the first thing below that will be join our email list.
okay,
And if you click that, that is the
got it.
form.
Thank
And
you.
if you want the student updates, just click that you're a student. Okay, so moving on to the next portion of the agenda, we're going to do voices from the field. This will include our presentation from our fabulous student, Shreya Meta. But before we get there, we have a couple of quick poll questions for you. So I am going to launch them and it will pop up on your screen. Please just click the response that best suits you or your district. So the first question that we're launching is just pretty general. Do you have student reps on your board? This would be official student representatives. So I've heard lots of boards say that there are student advisory panels, etc. We're curious specifically on this call about student reps. So that question is out there. I'm going to give it another minute and make sure that all of you guys get your vote in. And as soon as you do, I will close the panel and show the results on the screen. So I'm going to close this one in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And as you can see, I think you can see the results. 22 of the districts that are on the call, so a little over 70%, have student reps on their board, and 9 districts, about 30%, do not. So thank you for engaging there. And then I have one more quick poll, which is about how often you might engage student reps. If you're one of those that doesn't have student reps on your board, maybe how often is it that you engage with other students, whether that's your ASB officers or just your general student body, trying to get a sense of that. So if you'll please respond to that poll, looks like they're coming in. Thank you. Looks like the majority of you are saying monthly thus far. I am going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And as you can see on the screen, a lot of you are bi-monthly or monthly. Some of you do it weekly. That's great. For those of you that said other, at some point, I'm going to pick your brain about what that means. So thank you for engaging with these polls. So now we're going to move on. I'm going to pass the microphone over to Shreya Meta. She's a student from Richland School District. She was introduced to WSSDA in a couple of different ways. We've met her through the State Board of Education, as well as also through her ESD. Shreya is working on a project related to student engagement, so I'm going to pass the mic over to her and let her share a little bit about that. And we also asked her specifically what meaningful student engagement looks like and what she might recommend school boards do differently as they're engaging students. So Shreya, welcome, and the microphone is all yours. And if you just let me know when you want me to advance slides, I am happy to do that.
Okay, so again, my name is Shreya Meta, and like I say up there, change is catalyzed by best practice and student voice. I feel like personally, so essentially I should probably lay up a framework. Since about August, I have been working on this project just regarding student voice because I had been getting really involved at the state level with AWSL, with the state board, but it was funny because like I was so involved at that level, but I couldn't seem to get engaged with my local level where I could make a lot of changes that could really directly improve my education. But it was really hard to even lay the framework because everything felt so closed off. So I sent a couple of emails and started interviewing people, started asking superintendents what models they have. I interviewed a bunch of student reps. And here are just some of the things I found out. Logan, you can move to the next slide. So really have a super duper intentional selection process. And, you know, a lot of times, schools will just go to the nearest ASB president or ASB vice president, something like that. But that just can't happen. You need to let students throw their name in the hat. For me personally, I think in my district, it's been a little bit neglectful regarding student voice because we've been staying with the same practices rather than continually changing them as the times change. One thing that a lot of student reps I did interview said they loved was just really have an interview component because that's where you really see which students shine and which students can make the biggest difference and the biggest advocacy impact. And another one was some familiar sentiment I heard from a lot of students was just the fact that they didn't really know what the position was before they got on. They wish that they'd had some kind of orientation before the fact, you know, before they get into the interview. And you know, a lot of students they don't realize what kind of role they're getting themselves into. So it's really helpful when people give them a very clear layout. Hopefully, which WSSDA is working on some kind of layout that districts can use. You can move to the next one. And student representatives should actually act as representatives. A lot of times, you know, it feels like they're just there to look shiny on the board or to be like, oh, they are just our advice. And the problem that comes from that is when students aren't actually part of the process, like in making decisions and helping make decisions, of course, then they really can't provide the best kind of student voice, and neither party is really fulfilling their full responsibility. Because as the school board, you should be helping the student get a good, an educational experience out of it, especially because it teaches them so much about the workings of some kinds of public service, and it helps them actually represent their students. What I think I see all too often is, you know, they have like 2 or 3 kids on the board who were not really informed of what they'd actually be doing. There's no like set guidelines for what they do. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation on both ends because the students don't know what's going on and the district is not really getting the advice of all students. They're getting some fumbling opinions, which obviously isn't fulfilling the purpose. And one particular model that I really liked talking to, and I actually talked to them just yesterday, was Pasco School District. They have 3 board representatives, and their board representatives actually lead a larger group of students that's open to many more people. There's like 30 kids on their bigger group of students, and I just love that model because it engages even more students in the conversation. But I definitely think every district can genuinely improve so much by making the smallest changes, even if it's just letting students be the consistent input throughout the meetings. That's where a lot of those advisory councils fall very flat, when, you know, you only use the advice, but then during the actual meeting, you look at it, oh, this is adult time. Like adult time and student time just cannot be separated. You can read the next slide. So again, these are like some of the models that I saw student advisory councils, student board members. And like I mentioned, I really like the model of having student board members and advisory council. I know a lot of districts are very set on having a student advisory council because in their mind it looks more fair, and it seems more fair because you can say, oh, I have like 3 different high schools in my district, how can I do it? But and they're huge high schools, and that's the case with Pasco. Like Chiawana is the largest high school, and what I really love about that advisory council is that advisory councils are not too hard to like get in place, and you can really engage and help mobilize a lot of students. But then student board members can really keep that on track and really intentionally be authentic to many different student perspectives, which is of course the most important part of the entire thing, just hearing authentic voices. I think oftentimes what happens in the rooms is, if without that kind of designated time for students or designated place for students, we get completely washed away. And it's really difficult to make an impact as a student when you don't see a clear pathway with who to go to. Like I was trying to help make changes in my district, and there was no students I knew who to go to. Like the advisory council wasn't particularly publicized, so I didn't have like a student figurehead that I could connect with and who could help me find a pathway. So not only does having a student representative who's actually a representative help the board, but it also helps out the larger group of students who can see that person and be like, oh, I can get help from them. They're the pathway to me getting somewhere further. You can move on to the next slide. And time for change. I feel like things can stay so stationary, especially right now. It feels like we can't talk about anything other than the coronavirus. Everything maybe we can be like, oh, we definitely need to address mental health in the future, but right now we have to talk about coronavirus. But what that's turning into is staying at the lower rungs of this ladder. I love looking at this little ladder of student involvement because I think it really shows you like where are you at, because just having the student voice is not enough when it's strictly for decoration. Having it is not enough when it's just about we get surveys every now and then, because you don't really learn anything and you're not helping engage students. So I think meaningful student involvement, it will alleviate student frustration, and you can better hear and share diverse student experiences, and even your students combat this big problem of tokenizing voices by giving more than just advice. You can be part of that kind of change right there. And of course, they can plan student voice events. But I'd like to also say that you don't necessarily need to have a board represent, or you don't necessarily, that's not the only way to engage with students. There's so many other ways. And so a lot of them are just really, really simple. Hosting a student town hall, at least in my district, we do these things called town halls, where anyone can come and talk about, whatever they're experiencing, and based upon what the board's been doing. But a lot of times that falls to the parents who are already super duper involved, even though it's supposed to be like including students. So having specific space for that, and even replying to student emails. I see it all the time in my district. Students who like put something out there, or they send in, like a little bit of advice, but their efforts are never elevated. Their efforts are never given any attention to or really energized, because I think I am just living proof of that. I sent one email to Parker, who's on the state board, and I had kind of talked to him before, but then it started developing into something because he actually put a little bit of time into helping elevate my voice, and now I've been doing some pretty good stuff, if I say so myself, and it was just one email. And when that's not done on my own, on a student's own level, it's really tricky, So having those emails, replying personally, I know sometimes you have to send that, thank you for your feedback, we will take that into consideration, but it can't be too often students do pour their heart out, respond. It's a really, it feels good. And again, just elevating every single student's efforts. Sometimes at my schools, we get students who are like, hey, could we start like a GSA or something like that? So that's a Gay Straight Alliance Club. But then, no one's opposed to it, but no one's going to be like, yes, we got you, we're going to do this together. But perhaps if there was that better student voice carved in at the highest level, that could help trickle down and hopefully share student priorities and make everyone feel safer. And I think that's all I have, Logan.
Well, Shreya, thank you so much for coming to share. Thank you for your leadership in this work. And I know that the school directors on this call appreciate you being here. Before we move on, I wonder, as long as Shreya is good with it, does anyone have any questions for Shreya while we've got her on the line before we move on? If you do, please type question in the chat box. And okay, we've got at least one. So Lori, you're up.
Hey, Shreya, how are you? It's good to see you again. Good. My question to you is, you are doing all this research. You've done an amazing job. You've talked to several different school districts about their programs. How best are you going to, how are you going to present this to our school districts, our school board members? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. One thing that I'm trying to do with all of the information, so I have some basic data, like who has the districts, which districts have something, which districts have that alternative form. And I'm basically going to put it into a document just filled with student opinions on the matter that maybe, WSSDA will include in some of their resources eventually, because I think it's super important to have those perspectives. One thing that I'm also doing is I'm going to be on a panel with the state board about how we can elevate student efforts. And then the other thing that's kind of way further away is I'm going to take some of the amazing student representatives that I talked to and moderate a panel for the state board where, maybe people want to jump on there and write some policy like California has. Just a thought in case people, but yeah, and just putting it out there. But I think it's also been a very powerful experience for many of the representatives that I've talked to, because the students, I'll mention something, they'll be like, wait, other schools get that? Like other schools get a credit out of it, or other schools get like a compensation of some kind? And then them hearing other people's ideas, like, oh, I hadn't even thought about having an Instagram page, or I didn't even thought about that. It's really helpful for the students themselves, and they're just bursting with ideas.
Thank you. We have two more questions. Next up is Brian Giannini Upton from Mercer Island.
Thank you very much, Shreya. Great to see you. Always enjoy seeing you on panels. I have a question for you. The third point in that last slide, you say providing more than just advice. So in relation to school boards specifically, where school boards are empowered and sworn into office and are the decision-making force within a district, the legal force. They're the ones that hire the superintendent and manage the superintendent. How can you provide, how has anyone provided more than an advisory position or input with the board outside of the board, basically carving space and giving decision-making power? So I appreciate that the photo is talking about engagement with students, which I love, but specifically talking about the school board, the 5 or 7 if you're Seattle individuals with the power to make those decisions. How do you engage students or any stakeholder beyond an advisory position?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. My wording in that was a little bit, but I think a lot of people, that was mainly to counteract this idea that the student voice advisory councils are enough, as opposed to actually having someone be a representative, because I genuinely think that there's such a huge difference between knowing that you're there to give advice and knowing that you're there to represent other students. And because what you'll see, and I am on a lot of different student groups, when it is about giving advice, when it's set up like, Shreya, you're here to give advice, all I do is talk about my personal opinions. Like it is all about me, right? But then when it's more of a representative position, yes, you are providing advice, but it's not your own like personal thoughts as much unless you're specifically asked for them. Because a lot of times it's really difficult to have, one of the biggest points that I've been trying to see is explore like what kind of student is able to be in these positions and how can we break down barriers so that they can be engaged. But you're always going to have a level of difficulty engaging the students furthest away from educational justice, and that's going to always be a thing. But when the student in place is there and then they don't know that it's also their responsibility to totally talk about, you know, other students and those students who are furthest away from educational justice, they're not going to realize that they're a representative. They are a representative. They are not just there to give advice. I think there's a fundamental difference in a student's mindset. And, you know, I feel like sometimes it's as simple as making that distinction, because in my own district a couple days ago, well, this month, we've been working on this thing about amending our own constitutions on our student level, because it's not that the fact that, you know, our high schools we're all like so mean and privileged and we hate everyone. No, it was the fact that we'd never actually critically thought about it. So I called the other schools ASB president. I was like, hey, you should all change this at your school because we're changing our process for selecting students at our school. And it's like, whoa. And then she was like, wait, I didn't even realize we were like supposed to be doing that. It wasn't really explained to me. I thought we were just there to tell the superintendent what we thought about distance learning.
Brilliantly illuminated. Thank you so much, Shreya.
Thanks, Shreya. We've got time for one more. So Sarah, I see you have a question in there, but I apologize. We've only got time for one more. So maybe Shreya and Sarah, you guys can connect afterwards or in the chat box. Our last question for this segment will go to Wendy Ragusa. Wendy, do you want to speak it or?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Shreya, thank you so much. This has totally energized me. But my question is for you. We've had stellar student reps since I've been on the board just these last 4 years, and we've had 3, mostly coming from leadership clubs or ASB. A plus in meeting in person is we've had students that were interested come to board meetings, and I feel we should ask our board reps to extend that invitation for our Zoom meetings. But any other clever ways, I guess, in which to prepare, recruit, promote that you've come across? And I'm sorry, I had to step away and I may have missed this in your presentation, but I'm curious to hear what your idea is for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that's kind of the thing. I've been picking people's brains about that. Like the biggest thing is just really emphasizing, like making, because I feel like it's more an overwhelming thing if the students need to start knowing what the school board is and what it does from the get-go. Like as soon as they're like in 8th grade, they should be very aware of what's happening. And part of the way that students do that is, you know, they have Instagrams and then they put it on their Instagram. But I would say go a step further and have the student representatives work with your communications person to develop some kind of segmented social media account where they can post their own, like, the problem is when it's not a very designated thing, it feels like maybe the advice is not really going there. But if it's managed by student representatives and by your communications person, that could be really helpful in just making it way more visible. Because or making everything, or even getting kids more involved in some of the meetings. If they knew public comment happens at 8 o'clock, you got this. You know, like, come on, you can get in there, because it's really hard for students to, you know, go on some of the platforms that districts tend to use for that thing. Not many students use Facebook, and it almost seems like there's not really the interest in making it a very available thing to students through things like social media that we actually use, right? So having that be a very clear thing. One cool thing that I think was actually in Lori's school district was their representatives giving presentations to all of their high school classes, which I think is super cool. you know, going into the classes, and then people find out what the student representatives do. And that really puts a face behind it. I know that's how a lot of activities do recruiting. And I think just making it very clear that those students are supposed to be allies. It's not like an exclusive club or anything, but they're just supposed to be allies. They're supposed to help. And getting that out there through social media is probably the best advice I could give you in the virtual world.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Well, Shreya, thanks so much again for being here. You're welcome to stay for the next portion of our agenda, which includes some breakout conversations. Thanks to everybody who asked questions. If you didn't get your question asked or answered, Shreya did put her email address in the chat box. So I would assume that is an invitation to reach out to her. And Shreya, we look forward to continuing our conversations with you in support of your project as well. So thanks for being here. Moving on to the next portion of our agenda, we're going to go into breakout groups. So we're going to go in, there's going to be 4 to 5 people in each group. You're going to be in your groups for 10 minutes. And the question that we'd like you to consider is, what will you do differently based on what you heard today to engage student voices in your district? So I just went ahead and put that in the chat box. I will remind you, please, to elect someone to, when we come back, share out something from your group. What I'm going to do is just call on people as they let me know they have a comment. So I'm going to send you off, and I will see you all in about 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hope your conversations in small groups were well and informative. I would like to call on any of you that may have something to share with the whole group. It's 12:52. We will have until 12:58 to do share outs. So what I'll need you to do is please type comment in the chat box if you have something you want to share. If you're noticing that maybe we're running out of time and have a long queue of speakers, go ahead and just type what you'd like to share into the chat box and people can get it that way. I appreciate Brian actually modeling that, so that's great. Thank you, Brian. So let's go ahead and start with Lori Oviatt.
Hey, so I was in a breakout room with Rebecca and John, and we talked about one of the things I took away from Shreya. So, you know, here's the deal. I've been dealing with student voice for a long, long time. I learn something new every single time I have this conversation. And her comment about orienting students ahead of time to learn what a student rep is kind of struck me in a way of going, hey, I as a board director should invite and should have host work studies on student representation and what it means for our students to join us. And that should start in 8th grade. Yes, our student reps do go and talk to our students, but board
I don't know if it's just on my end, but well, I think Lori might have froze, or at least she did on my end. So Lori, if you can hear us, maybe go ahead and type the rest of your comments in the chat box. Moving on, we'll move on to Shreya, who has a comment. So Shreya, you're up.
Okay, sorry if I'm hogging too much time. I know I already talked today, but there's definitely one thing I want to share that I feel like would be beneficial for anyone's district. If you do have like student representatives, or if you have, you know, that council, you can find students that I would say the best way to kind of engage them to act as representatives is to be like, hey, we want you to plan a panel of students, like 8 or 9 kids, and we're like, I want you to moderate this panel. Maybe it's like a quarterly thing, but that really empowers them. And I know that because I've been on that end of it, right? Where I'm the one planning the panel and I'm just thinking about all these complex issues, and that I planned a panel about equity in my district. And I think that really helped move the conversation forward, and it helped more student voices get heard. And it also gave me a sense of responsibility. And that might be a great way to start some of those, some of that shift from just them being like, here's what I think, to here I am acting as an actual representative, and making that super duper clear. And one thing that I talked about in my breakout room was like the difference between telling a student, you're here to advise us rather than that representative stuff, because it's like the board, like they're elected officials, right? But then the students on there should also know that they're getting themselves into a form of public service. It's not just another extracurricular thing, which is what a lot of kids, including me, that's what I thought about all of this stuff before. So thank you.
Thank you, Shreya. Moving on, we'll go to Sarah Betnell.
I was in a room with Wendy and Candace, and Shreya dropped in right at the end. It was so exciting. And Wendy, who's up in Mount Vernon, shared that they have 3 reps. Do I have it right, Wendy? Yep. Who then come and share out with the board on a specific rotating basis where they are able to bring and share specific topics. And Wendy, correct me if I have this wrong. I was chatting with you to make sure I had it right, so I don't want to misrepresent. And I love the intentionality of that, and sharing that equity of voice between the reps. And one of the things that I was sharing with the group that we're having a conversation, our district is about being more intentional about the inclusion of our reps in the conversation during the meeting. And I had shared this back with our president and superintendent during the WSSDA conference, actually. And I really appreciated that our president, who's an Indigenous woman, shared back and said, I appreciate the intent of that. And we run a danger of tokenism by asking our 2 reps to be voices of all students of color. And what we should do, and what I would like to do, is ask them what role they want to have with the board, so that they can determine their mode of representation. And I really appreciate what Shreya shared, because if they do not want to convene student advisory councils, but we want to have student advisory councils, then we can look at how do we collaborate with them to facilitate that with students who may be interested in leading that council and working with our student reps to make that happen, so that it's not just because they became the rep, we don't change the job responsibility under them when that might not have been what they thought they were coming to do.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Sarah, and to everybody else. There are a couple of additional comments in the chat box. I see another one just popped in from Shreya, so you want to probably check those out. We've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to close us quickly with a December action. You will likely get another one next week when we talk about the 2021 session, so I'm going to keep this one simple. If you have student reps, please make sure they sign up for our distribution list. Or if you don't have student reps, why don't you go ahead and sign up for it, and you'll get the same types of information. And then also, if you don't have student reps, consider what you might do in your district to create space for student voice. You know, developing a student rep program takes some time, so maybe it's not that right away, but maybe there are some things you can do in the immediate term to just hear from your students, as we've heard throughout today's meeting. That is so important. So that's what we want to leave you with. When it comes to next meetings, like I said, we do have another one next week on Tuesday the 15th at noon. If you registered for this one, your registration should still be the same, so no need to go back. In that one, we're going to be focused on the 2021 legislative session and what we all know collectively about how that's going to work. And in terms of 2021, our meeting schedule for this group is to be decided. Throughout the session, Marissa and I realized that we need to set the legislative session as our first priority, advocating for and representing you all. So what we'd encourage, at least through this session, is that you register for our WSSDA networking calls. They happen weekly on Thursday at noon. We started those in March when the coronavirus pandemic hit and schools shut down. We will be continuing those throughout the session, throughout the year. And during the session, we're going to have Marissa and I 30 minutes on each agenda to talk about the ledge session and what's happening. So I am going to put that link in the chat box right now. If you're not already registered, you can tune in there. And then, of course, after the legislative session ends, these meetings will come back in one form or another. So stay tuned for a mid-2021 relaunch of the LegRep meetings. So with that, I want to say thanks for attending today. Wish everyone a happy holidays, and hope we see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I'm going to shut her down. I've got another meeting to get to. So have a great day. Talk to you guys soon.